So this is part two of the Art Cinema and Avant-Garde slideshow, and I'm going to show you some more clips and talk some more about these films that differ from what we're used to seeing. So when we talk about film, one way to approach it is thinking about what is the structure, what organizes the film. In most Hollywood entertainment, it's the narrative. It's a narrative structure that organizes a film. That is responsible for the sequence in which we see the shots, we hear the sounds, and so on and so forth. It's about telling a narrative, telling a story. In avant-garde cinema, that is very rarely the case, or at least what constitutes a story is quite different. So the organizing structure in avant-garde film and in some art cinema as well is often not narrative. It's often not logical even. We can't make sense of it. It's not that we can look at those images of the moth wings, say, in the Stan Brakhage film and figure out that there's a certain number of them of a certain color at a certain time and so on and so forth. Instead, there are other things that are organizing it, often that have to do with form. They're formal characteristics, the ways in which colors are put together, or the way that the light plays, a kind of rhythm that has to do with the style rather than the content of it in a way being logical. So despite all that, even if we can't look at a film and say, well, this is clearly what it means, there are still ways in which that structure organizes it that makes it feel like it teaches us something, or we can understand something about its subject that wasn't there before, right? We can look at that and have some understanding of it, or get something out of it that isn't just about logic and rationality. And in that sense, avant-garde film can be very poetic, right? That is what poetry is about. It's not about telling us exactly what we need in some clear manner. It's about eliciting emotions in ways that are often short or contradictory and that people have different responses to. So in that way, avant-garde film is more like poetry than it is like a book, right? Or something of that nature. It's about eliciting responses in a way. So I'm going to show you another film by Stan Brakhage and talk over it some. And this film is called The Wonder Ring. It's one of my favorite films. I first saw this when I was in graduate school, and I for the life of me couldn't remember the name of it or who made it. And for years, I wondered what this film was and tried to find it. And then luckily I found it again, and now I always share it with students. And it's a pretty simple film, but I just remember that the first time I watched this, it just kind of blew my mind in terms of how do you go about making a documentary. In this case, this is a documentary about a particular train station that was going to be torn down. And so Stan Brakhage was commissioned to make a documentary about it. And this is a film that he made. So I'll go ahead and start it up, and I'll talk a little bit here. Hopefully, here we go. So this is one of Brakhage's things that he always liked to do, is to actually scrape the name and his name into the film itself rather than using some kind of title card. So in a way, this kind of follows a typical, what we might call as a typical form. Is that was kind of an establishing shot of the train station, and now we're tilting up as we see the steps that are leading into the station, that way to the ticket office. And then pretty soon we're going to actually get onto the train. We're still looking around. Right? So this is a documentary, not in the sense that it's actually, there's no narrator telling us, there's no graphics on screen telling us the history of this place or how old it is. In a lot of ways, we're walking through and seeing it, right? As if you were there and you were looking at it, what you might see. And our eyes are being drawn to these the colorful glass. And Brakhage likes to play around a lot with light and just seeing what light does to glass, or the reflections that you see, right? So you're going to see in this film, you don't get really clear shots of people's faces, of who the people are on the train. You just kind of see bodies. And you're aware that there are people there. watch, you get this cumulative sense of what it would be like at a moment of sitting on that train, but also maybe memories, flashes, shots of things that would stick in your head. So it's not, in other words, a simple, here's where you get on the train and this is what you see at the beginning and this is the middle and this is the end. It's not as linear as that, right? And that was just another shot where you see the reflection of people in the window. So it's about what's outside the window, what's inside. It's not documenting either place, rather what it is to be on this train and travel through the space of the city. And I hope that you'll go through. I've put a link to this film as well there in the unit folder. I hope you'll go through and watch the whole thing. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip ahead, even though I'm kind of like in a daze and I'm in the zone of this film right now. I love how decrepit this train looks, but God, there's just something about it. There's another reflection of a person. And also one of my favorite things is the way that the glass distorts what's going by, like in these scenes. It's just fun to watch. And I think that this is the kind of film that you see, and then if you're lucky, your life changes a little. You start looking at the world around you a little bit differently. That this is a particular way of seeing the world, and that's what film allows you to do, is to share that particular way of seeing the world with people. All right, enough of my own poetic statements. Moving on here. So, to bring it back to the Nichols chapter on this material of the avant-garde, what he talks about and how he kind of frames this conversation is thinking about, in cinema there are all of these different types of forms. There's entertainment, there's storytelling, there's documentary, there's avant-garde, and in them there's different kinds of participation. That is, we as viewers participate in the film in a way, right? We're not, of course, literally in the film, but are part of the viewing experience. Cinema exists not just as film, but as an experience of watching film. We as viewers participate in cinema in a number of ways. One is through having emotional investment, right? And this is what we talk about a lot with narrative-based film, where there's a central character that we identify with, or we become involved with in terms of we understand what his or her motivations are and what kind of obstacles that they are having to deal with, and so we sympathize with them, or even if we don't agree with the things that we do, we're emotionally invested in them, right? And then there's intellectual engagement, which is more about trying to make sense of things, looking and searching and looking for meaning to come out of it. And that might be more common in documentaries, perhaps, or in avant-garde film as well, where you kind of are challenged to do this. And art cinema, too, doesn't always make it as easy as just being emotionally involved with people. And certainly in some kinds of mainstream film, too, there's a kind of intellectual engagement in that you've got to make sense of things. So, having said that, these things aren't mutually exclusive. Film often does a couple of these at the same time. And some films really, lean one way more so than the others. And then the third is ideological involvement. Which is a kind of the more political perspective. If we talk about ideology, and this is a term that we'll focus on more later in the term, ideology basically means, in the way we discuss it, the ways in which we make sense of the world and our place in the world. What are the value systems? What are the belief systems, right? So in that sense, ideological involvement means that we, as we watch something, we are recognizing a kind of political perspective or argument about how to see the world or the events in that film. And our involvement might be, being persuaded of that or adopting that perspective, or it could be rejecting it, right? Both of those are ideological involvement. Watching something certainly doesn't mean that we adapt any of these things, right? We don't necessarily become emotionally invested. We might not care about those people. We might not be able to make sense of it. And we certainly might not believe what we're seeing. But all these are different kinds of participation. So if we think about film as an active experience, not just for the people that make it, but for the people that watch it, these are the different things that we might be doing. Okay, another couple of films that I'm not going to allow to play all the way out because they're just too long, but that you're going to watch in the unit a couple of really famous films, avant-garde films, early films. This one directed by Luis Buñuel, as well as famous surrealist artist Salvador Dali, Chien Andalou, otherwise known as the Andalusian Dog. I want you to watch that and think about how do the shots connected, what kinds of continuity is there if it doesn't follow typical spatial, temporal continuity editing like we described. And what is your experience in the film? As you can see, this is a surrealist film, and some kind of bizarre things take place. I want to give you a taste of it to make sure that you watch it. If you can't watch the whole thing, slideshow. This is the famous shot coming up. And if you can make it through this, you can make it through the whole film. And what is he doing here? He's playing with montage. He's playing with montage. And bringing shots together in a way that seems meaningful. So this is a classic of avant-garde cinema, and it is not going to be very clear what it is about. You're going to have to work a little bit and see what you think it's about. Okay, the other film that you're going to watch is called Meshes of the Afternoon, famous film by Maya Deren. And what's interesting about this film and what I'd like you to think about is how this film really creates a particular subjectivity. It wants you kind of inhabit it from this woman's perspective of the world that she's in. And it does this, as you can see, maybe in not the typical ways that we're used to. But I want you to think about that. And this one, these films actually do have sound, even though I've turned it down here. But think about the strategies. This has a very interesting soundtrack. It's not just simple music. There's a lot of sort of primitive effects, although I don't like to use that term in it. So think about that. How does this bring you into a particular subjectivity to experience this? So this is a case of avant-garde film that is dealing with emotional involvement and intellectual involvement as well.